All right, according to my clock, it is now 6 p.m. Central Time, so welcome everyone to Annotated Bibliographies and Article Critiques. I'm Dr. Basil Considine. I'm on the faculty with the ACU Online Writing Center, and today we are going to be doing just what the title says. Now, this is something where there are a variety of different annotated bibliography and article critique assignments in different programs, sometimes more than one. If you're a nursing student, you can expect to write more than one annotated bibliography. If you're a leadership student, you can expect to write more than one. So if there are any particulars that you would like to share about which program you're in or which class you're in, we can, at certain opportunities, look at the specifics of that assignment. Some preliminaries before we dive into the main content. If you are new to the ACU Online Writing Center or haven't visited us in a while, we provide feedback now for students in just about all of ACU's online programs. The only exception at the moment is the Graduate School of Theology, what I call the God exception. They are sometimes on a cloud of their own. So if you are a MBA student, you're welcome to come and work with us. If you are an undergrad student in one of our online bachelor degree programs, you're welcome to work with us. If you're a doctoral student, same thing. Most of our students work with us through what we call asynchronous appointments. You upload your paper, you make an appointment, and we send you feedback via email within 24 hours. Because we have become a very popular service on campus, I recommend at the start of the semester, when you see when things are due, that you go ahead and schedule an appointment in advance, because we do fill up. We do have a waiting list, but again, and if you want to make sure you have an appointment, make one sooner rather than later. We also have real-time appointments as an option. This is by request, as we can do these either by phone or Zoom. Zoom will be sharing the screen like you see my slides today, where we can talk about particulars of text or phrasing, anything where you feel that a question would be easier to answer with the back and forth in real time. Now, we also have people who will put marginal comments in their papers and ask, hey, can I do this? Or is this phrasing right? Or is the format incorrect? And that's fine, that's great. We all have people who put notes in their appointment form saying, I had a question about this paragraph on that page. And that's also fine. The important thing is to state as clearly as you can what you're looking for so we can help make sure you get what you want. We also have many other webinars such as this one, and a whole set of resources, including sample papers and blog posts on the Online Writing Center website. If you just joined us and are wondering why people are sharing their email addresses, that is for anyone who wants to receive an emailed copy of the recording for this webinar and a copy of the slide deck after this. We always offer this to people who have RSVP'd in advance for these webinars, but if you come in and you have to leave early, or you just want an easy access to one review, that's fine. Just give me your email address and I'll add you to the list. The general workflow is, again, make an appointment with the Writing Center, upload a paper, and then we'll send you feedback generally within 24 hours of your appointment time. Sometimes it's faster. I have some students who will make an appointment for Thursday, and then if I notice, oh, they uploaded their paper early on Tuesday, and I've got some time, so let me send you that feedback now. That's totally fine. We also have students who use our Turnitin inboxes just to check to make sure that they've marked their quotations correctly using the plagiarism detection feature, which is really good for catching, oh, you left a quotation mark off and you did not mark that quote. Better to learn that early and take care of that before you turn it in rather than learn about it afterwards. So there are no charges for any of the Writing Center services. These are all things that are a perk. And I say enjoy that because I used to work for a university in Los Angeles, and we looked around and several of our peer universities were charging $50 or $60 an hour for a Writing Center appointment. And I don't know about you, but I really like Writing Centers, but I would probably use them a lot less if I had to pay $50 or $60 an hour. It is included as a tuition perk here at ACU. So the last webinar in our sequence for this term, for summer one, is Introduction to Grant Writing. And this is something I'd say because I know we have a number of first and second semester students in the room today. If you are looking at any sort of research or writing project that will fit in more than the compass of one class, you should come to this. Because for a project of that scope, you want to see what opportunities there are for funding, where other people in other organizations might be willing to contribute money to help you do that project. I've been lucky to go many places around the world where, because I got funding, I was able to do something that otherwise I would have said, well, I don't really need that, or that's a great conference, but if I have to pay for all of it. On the other hand, if you're paying my airfare and you're paying my conference fees, I will absolutely go to a conference in Rome. So I strongly recommend that. We often have people coming in and saying, here's what I'm thinking about doing my dissertation research on, or here's my idea for a doctoral project. And we're able to use some of that time to help match them up with opportunities that are of interest to them. And I've had a couple students write back saying, I got the scholarship, I got the fellowship. And that's always great to hear, because if we're going to be working on something for a long time, it always feels better when someone else is paying you money to work on it. All right. We will be doing more webinars in the summer 2 term. And I'll just say, when you fill out our RSVP form, there's a space there where you can request webinars on a particular topic. And we try and create new webinars every year in response to the requests of students such as yourselves. All right, some other things that might be of interest to you, those will be in the slide deck. Let's move on to the main focus today. We are going to look at 3 related things: an article critique assignment, an annotated bibliography assignment, and the specific expectations you might get from certain assignments that require you to do an annotated bibliography. Now, the first one is one that we can spend more or less time on, depending on if someone has an article critique assignment coming up. If you do, please let me know in the chat room. Otherwise, we'll take a little faster way through that so we can spend more time on the annotated bibliography part. So there are a variety of assignments that will require you to write an article critique or an annotated bibliography. And when you see a slide like this, this is referring you to particulars, whether a particular course assignment or related materials that you can download, where we have prepared them and have given you a link like that to access an example, say, as well as if you're looking for, I'm in the MFTO program, I would like to look at the stuff specific to my program. Great. So looking at the list of people in the room here, if you joined us later, if you could please chime in on which program you're in, that helps us customize the examples here. I see we have a number of people in the EDD program. So I am going to go ahead and start with an EDD example. If you are, I see we have a psychology undergrad. If you are in your junior or senior level classes, this often comes up where you're tasked with essentially reporting on the literature. And there are a couple different formats where that can come up. The literature review is more where you're synthesizing all these together as a preliminary for work or research on the topic. An annotated bibliography is more of a, here's a quick guide. If you're working on this thing, you should probably know about these things. Great. All right, so let's look at some assignment instructions for an annotated bibliography assignment. An annotated bibliography is a list of citations to books, articles, and documents. Each citation is followed by a brief, usually about 150 to 250 word, descriptive and evaluative paragraph, the annotation. The purpose of the annotation is to inform the reader of the content, relevance, accuracy, and quality of the sources cited. So let's look at this, and the bolding is mine, by the way. List of citations, and it means that our format for sorting this is not interweaving these around an idea like you would in a lit review. and not trying to write an essay. We're basically listing, here's this source for that thing, here's stuff about it. Here's another source for that thing, here's some stuff about it. Here's more stuff about that. Now, the target length, 150 to 250 words, that is roughly 2/3 to a full page. So not small. Often when you're reading published annotated bibliographies, because they are more targeted than our assignments, you'll find that they'll be briefer, which is to say, you might see just a short paragraph of 5 or 6 lines sometimes. And that's usually because they define very narrowly. We're only telling you the stuff that you need to know if you're working on this specific thing in this condition. And because these assignments want to make clear that you know how to look for things and pull out key details, we ask you a few more things. 50 words is minimum. It depends on the assignment that you're looking at. 50 words is not very long. We'll actually look at an example in a moment. And it depends on the assignment. So if you mention a particular course, like say, Lead 711 that you're in, we can look at the particulars for that assignment. It does vary a bit by the program. More on this particular assignment guidelines. Annotated bibliography entries are often part of the pre-writing process for lit review, which is the case for our doctoral programs here. If you write good entries, when it comes time to write your literature review, your annotations can form the basis of the paper's body. If you write your annotated bibliography entries well now, much of your writing for that literature review will already be complete. This is very true because you are supposed to be picking things that are relevant to what you are doing. Some of the assignments even have a specific thing to talk about how it is relevant and how you think it will inform your work. So you don't want to be grabbing things that are of no use. But if you can enumerate, well, this is helpful, but not to my specific situation because of X, then you don't need to reread the article because you have those notes telling you, oh, it's not helpful for me because of these reasons. And you can, if you have to reference it all in your lit review, you've got that summary prepared. So what is an annotated bibliography? Well, first of all, it's a document that is summarizing selected details from published scholarship. You usually do not see an annotated bibliography about a government report or a database or something like that. You might find an annotated bibliography discussing literature about those things, but they are almost always about journal articles. And I believe all of the annotated bibliography assignments at ACU are about journal articles, peer-reviewed journal articles. You can think of it as a curated guide to select literature on a specific topic for a specific purpose. Now, most, but not all of the annotated bib assignments that I've seen at ACU give you space to write a brief introduction, which is basically laying out, here's this purpose that I'm writing this for. Here's what we're going to discuss in this because we're looking for stuff relevant to this specific situation. And it also provides a professional reference for further work on a topic. You can publish an annotated bibliography if you are in a job where you have certain promotion requirements, you get a bonus or something for publications. Annotated bibliographies are quite popular because they are relatively concise to do and thus relatively fast to do. I was at one job where they paid us a $500 bonus per peer-reviewed journal article that was published. One of my coworkers wrote 4 annotated bibliographies that year, and he got a $2,000 in bonus. That was very nice. I kind of wish I'd done the same that year, but I was writing something else at the time. It's not, however, supposed to be an abstract. Abstracts are giving more, here's a bird's eye view of it. Annotated bibliography is much more selective because you have that application, the what are we going to do with this information later? So it is also very concise, to the point, and both of these, they're not intended to be exhaustive. You're not trying to put every detail about it, just what's most relevant to decide, is this something I should look at later, or what are my takeaways for the things that we're doing? So some key differences between an annotated bibliography and an abstract. Well, you do include the full reference entry. If you're writing an abstract for almost every publication I've seen, as well as the ACU dissertations and doctoral projects, you don't include citations in your abstract. But the annotated bibliography, each entry starts with, here's the full reference entry. We often, not always, but often include citations to show the relation to specific literature. And it's deliberately not written to summarize a whole work, but just key elements of interest for readers working on a specific topic or purpose. More on the instructions. Pick a research interest that you think might lead to your potential dissertation topic, and be sure that all the research articles that you use speak to that research interest or topic. If the research interest you named in a previous assignment works, use that. If you know now that you do not want to pursue that topic, pick another. Again, if you're in our doctoral programs, this is essentially doing work in advance for your next project. So if you pick something that's relevant that you'd have to read anyway, it's two birds with one stone. Now, there are also some other suggestions that are given, like what specific problems result from poor teacher retention, or how does an authoritarian leadership style affect the school dynamic? These questions are intended to help you clarify what you are looking for, what details you choose to report on when you write up your annotated bibliography entry. I saw a question about where you can publish an annotated bibliography. We'll look at that in probably 10 minutes or so. So, content checklist. What do you have in your annotated bibliography? Well, for ACU, this tends to be this list here. We need the full reference entry, a permalink there, a link that can be used to find it even if, say, the journal website works. So a DOI is perfect. A summary of the relevant details relevant to what you're doing. An analysis, as usually of the strengths and limitations, and discussion of how this can be applied. Now, I decided that I would go ahead and I would draft up a sample annotated bibliography entry for today, because we've moved to APA 7, and I thought, this will just be easier if we have something that exactly matches APA 7. So I'm going to go ahead and change my screen sharing here. You should now be seeing my screen in Microsoft Word. Please let me know if you don't see that right now. You should be seeing Word by sharing a paper called Styles of Leadership Annotated Bibliography. And we have the cover page here. I've been using our course paper template for APA 7, which is why we have these comments on the end showing how to do various things. I'm writing this up per the requirements of Leadership 711, the Theories of Leadership course. And this particular assignment asked that there be a brief introduction, so I've given myself a paragraph. And I'm still writing this, so I haven't filled in all of the specific styles that I'm discussing. But I know I have to discuss 3, so started with the first one, and then I'll fill in the others after I pick them. It is important for both leaders and followers to understand the different styles of leadership available to appropriately shape their actions and expectations, and to play to the needs and desires of a group. This annotated bibliography is comprised of a discussion of some recent literature on path goal leadership, something I haven't selected yet, and something else. And so then to separate these entries, I just put in an APA level 1 heading. Doesn't have to be fancy, just needs to be informative. So Path Goal Leadership article number 1. And then you can see I have a reference entry here with the full information here, the full reference citation, and the same as you would have in your reference list. And I've got a link to the journal website here. Now, I'm going to see if I can share my screen side by side for you folks so that you can see the instructions and how I have mapped those on to this assignment. It's going to take just a moment as I rearrange things. And the text might get a little bit small, so please let me know if you have any trouble reading this. Okay, I'm going to change up the share, and just a fair warning, I am going to be sharing my whole desktop. So if you send me a private message, it will show up. So just wait till we're done with this part, and you'll be able to send me a private message if you have a question you don't want to ask in front of the whole class. All right, so you should now be seeing my Word document on the left-hand side and my web browser on the right-hand side. So I have open here the Leadership 711 class. Whoops, that's last term. Let me back up. And here we are, summer 1. All right, so assignments. So we've got this Styles of Leadership Annotated Bibliography assignment here. So you can see from the instructions here, there are some guidelines here. For this particular assignment, each of these annotations is supposed to be 180 to 250 words. Now, I mentioned that 250 words is about 1 double-spaced page of text. So we don't want to get too verbose here, but we also have some latitude to do discussion here. Now, in this case, the instruction says a descriptive and evaluative paragraph. Okay, that's one where I would actually ask the professor, do they want to literally in 1 paragraph or in multiple paragraphs? And I think that's probably a case where we just need to tweak this. Sorry, I think this is referring to the general format here, because if you look down here, it actually says to divide this into 3 separate paragraphs that regularly it's 1 or 2, but in this case, use 3. If you're wondering, when you're looking at a published annotated bibliography, often you'll see that if it's just 1 paragraph, that they don't indent the first line, as you can see on the left hand here, and so it looks like this. The reason is that it just looks a little bit cleaner and takes up less space versus having this. So if you are publishing something in a printed journal and page space is at a premium, they often do things like that. But because this is an assignment, this is saying, and just have regular paragraphs after this. All right, so let's talk about length here. If you are not familiar with this feature, in Word, if you just select a bit of text here, down here at the bottom of the screen, it tells me, oh, that's 129 words that I have selected. So when the instructions say approximately 150 words, all right, I'm in the right ballpark here. Could maybe fit in another sentence or 2, but that's about right. When it says the analysis should be about 50 words, well, let me check my paragraph here. That's 77, so a little bit long. If there was a good way to just move a sentence over to the other paragraph, then they'd end up being really about the right size. And this one here, That's 51 words, which it says here the application section should be approximately 51. That is more or less perfect. So let's look and see what this assignment did and what it asked and how I wrote that up here. So first off, we need the bibliographic citation in APA format, as we would in the reference page, and it should be double spaced. I often see people submitting their draft in single spaced, probably because they were looking at a published example, but the instructions here say double spaced and that it should be hanging indent. A hanging indent is this thing here where you see every line after the first one is bumped half an inch. That's very easy to do in Word. You just go ahead and you hit Command T if you're on a Mac, or Control T if you're on a PC, and it bumps every line after the first one in by half an inch. You can also use our APA reference style to do the same thing, but it doesn't matter. Usually the Command T, Control T shortcut is faster. Include a link to the article, strictly follow APA formatting, and rely most heavily on articles published within the last 5 years. That is also a common mistake where people are looking for things and they forget about that recent literature requirement, and they come in and all the sources are around 2000, and I think, well, gosh, 2000, I was an undergraduate back then. That's not too long ago. And then I think, well, actually, I'm a bit older than that now. So something that was 20 years ago, less likely to be considered recent research. Usually recent research is defined as the last 5 years. So other things to note here, it does specifically say, don't include these other things, just journal articles for this assignment, peer-reviewed journal articles. All right, so the summary says, include the author's affiliation. So I have here, this article was written by 3 personnel from the Ofe Human Resources Directorate of the Ghana Health Service. The type of article? Well, let's get back to that. The type of article, the research and research findings, empirical studies. Okay, the research investigated the leadership style preferences of both rank and file nurses and nurse managers at 5 hospitals in Eastern Ghana using quantitative research with a cross-sectional survey design and statistical analysis. Now you might read that and say, well, that sounds like everything that they need to know. But if we look at this and say type of article, it doesn't explicitly say that that's what this article is doing. So I can tweak that. So I could say this article contains the report on empirical research on the different leadership style preferences. Now, if I was to look at my word count here and say, oh gosh, that has gone up to 135. Yeah, if I'm going to move something out, I might need to slim that down. So at that point, you start looking at it and saying, okay, this article contains the report on empirical research on, and say, wait, I can simplify this. This empirical study, and just say this empirical study examined, and I believe all of our faculty agree that saying the study examined and is not considered anthropomorphism. Or you could also say this empirical study was designed to examine, but we're trying to keep things concise. I do see that someone wrote something in the chat window. I'm not going to check that just yet because, as I mentioned, I'm sharing my whole screen with you, so in case that was a private thing, that would show it to everyone. But I will get to that when we're done with this particular segment. All right, so next on the list, it says author's viewpoint and any other pertinent information. Well, this is one of those things where often you don't need to explicitly cover it because we're getting that from, for example, oh, they're part of the human resources as division of the public health service there. So we know that's their perspective here. This list does overlap a bit with this list. So open by stating the text thesis or purpose and the author's affiliations. That's these two sentences here. Summarize the main points of the article in your own words. Avoid personal bias. So you don't want to put in comments like, unfortunately or tragically. Those are examples of showing subjective reading. So just tell us, here's what they do. And don't at this point say, this is an extremely useful study. There's a point where you can weigh in on that later. So what is this doing? Well, Ethical leadership theory was used as the theoretical framework for assessing different leadership styles. Okay. Here it says what type of article. We've got that empirical study up here, so we're good. And the findings, well, we're working on that right now. This note is saying that you should be, for the most part, in this assignment, reporting on studies that did original research. So you might possibly have even someone else's annotated bibliography in here, but you shouldn't have 6 annotated bibliographies. Okay, so we have a list of the findings. More on findings. More on findings. More on findings. So this is really my summary here. Now, this paragraph here comes out to 130 words. So it's a little bit short of 150, but not enough to really arouse any, well, this seems conspicuously short. Let's look at the next one, analysis. And you'll notice that I'm just going right in the order that they're laid out in the assignment instructions here. Okay, so analyze the article's strengths and limitations. Is the information reliable? Is it biased or objective? What is the goal? Now, some of this you may have covered above, and 50 words is not a whole lot of space to do it here. So it's possible to reach this goal by front-loading some of that information earlier and touching on it just as needed to answer these prompts. So the main prompt here is strengths and limitations, which could include the reliability, and it could include any potential bias. So let's see what I have here. The ultimate aim of this research was to identify ways to increase nurse retention because of the global nursing shortage and high turnover rates. Well, this is the kind of thing where it could fit in as part of the summary, and it could fit in as part of the analysis. Now, if you're trying to set up the answer about was this done successfully, you know, a sentence like this works pretty well. As you see here, strengths include the research being conducted at a mix of public and private hospitals with a high number of participants. Now, if you're looking to write this more concisely because you're trying to bring your word count down, you might look at it and say, okay, I don't need the research. I could cross it out and have strengths include being conducted at a mix of public and private hospitals. We do want that high number of participants there, n equals 591, because if you're looking through this later and see, oh, well, these ones all have hundreds and hundreds, and that one has 10 participants, that's one of those things that helps you filter, okay, which one is more likely to be generalizable. Strengths and limitations, I think it is important to make it clear that you are answering both questions. Either what are the strengths, what are the limitations, and keep in mind that's related to what you're doing, so there may be more than you have space to talk about. But I'm trying to see, you know, can we apply these results for other hospitals? And yeah, having a lot of participants does help with that. A limitation was that these participants included both nurses and midwives, and the responses were not disaggregated, meaning they're all combined together and not separated out. in most of the published tables, which limits the generalizability of the information. Now, this is also another sentence where if you're saying, no, I really need to fit in some other things, I could look at it and see, how can I write this more concisely? And put in something like, okay, I can probably take this one out here. Actually, I can probably take this stuff out here. Nurses and midwives, make that possessive. And ta-da, I have cut out 6 words there. All right. So start with getting the information down first, and then if you need to, you can usually go and do a little bit of trimming like that, because this is intended to be very concise. Now we're down to the 3rd section here, with the application where it says, include a brief statement about the article's usefulness or uselessness to you in your research. Was this source helpful to you? How does it help you shape your argument? How can you use this? How has it changed how you think about your topic? Those are prompts to get you thinking, not necessarily questions you need to answer everyone outright, because you only have 50 words. So those are ways of getting an answer to this question. Well, how is this relevant or potentially useful to what you're trying to do? Well, here's my go at that. And it's my go in 51 words. This research is very relevant to my topic because I work in human resources leadership, and always read your text out loud because you'll find things like that word are missing, and am very interested in ways of increasing retention rates. The finding, that should be finding singular, finding that there was no single preferred leadership style, and that managers alternated leadership styles for different employees will inform my work in leadership training workshops. Okay. Now, it does have this important list here, which I always think is good to check. And it says that this should total no more than 250. So let me go ahead and check that by selecting it. So 259. Now from that, we're going to subtract these 2 that are crossed out there. So that's 257 minus these 6. That brings us to 251. All right, so I just have one more word I need to take out. And I can look at this and say, well, okay, I'm interested. That's the key thing. I can just type out the very. And now I am at exactly 250 words. Great. And since it's no more than 250 is just fine. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my whole desktop here, and I'm going to go ahead and look at that question that came up. So just a moment as I change this around. Okay, so there's a question about understanding journal articles, and an earlier question about where you could publish an annotated bibliography. So I am going to switch the sharing here to my web browser. All right, you now should be seeing my web browser where I brought up Google Scholar. Now, you can do this kind of search in the ACU library database. I'm doing it here partly because it's very easy to show, and also because you can link this with your ACU account so that clicking on links will download things that you have access to through ACU. I'm going to go ahead and search for annotated bibliography. And let's see, where have people been publishing those? And so if you're wondering, where can you publish one? Well, let's go ahead and look at just the last 2 years. And we find, okay, we've got books that are annotated bibliographies. All right, maybe I want to be more particular and stick with journal articles. Oh, all right, so we've got a peer-reviewed journal article here. And let's go ahead and let's narrow this down. Let's say we're doing this in psychology. And you'll find that this one here is an annotated bibliography of literature by a single person. Sure. We have one about modeling here. We have one on trauma. So there are lots of different ones here. And we can even look at this one here and see okay, well, it came out 2 years ago. It was published in the journal Academic Psychiatry, and we can access it through Springer. Great. We have a membership at Springer through ACU. So Google Scholar is more or less a Google internet search engine styled way of looking for literature. It is not as comprehensive as many of the things that we have access to through the ACU library catalog, but it is very fast. It's very easy to save, and you can link it with ACU. So it has easy convenience, especially if you're you hear about something you want to take a quick look up on your phone. And there are a couple features that if you start using them in Google Scholar, when you go back to the library, you'll see, oh, I can do that too. This is a very stripped down interface. So we have buttons like star, which is just add it to my list of stuff, save it. Cite, which will give you, oh, here's an APA style citation that I can copy and paste somewhere else. The formatting of these citations isn't perfect, but it saves you a lot of time in not having to type things in. You also have cited by, which is really handy for finding out has something being very influential. I'm just going to do a quick change here because you don't expect a lot of stuff to be citing things that were just published last year. But if we go to this book here, Psychiatry and the Cults, an Annotated Bibliography, we see, oh, here are 22 different sources, books included, that have been cited in this. And that book part is a really helpful thing to know. Google Scholar looks at a lot of books that other databases, including the ACU Library one, don't, just because of how they're set up. A Google Scholar can go look in Google Books, where lots of stuff is being digitized in Google's proprietary database. It's catching up in other things, but again, for that book connection and a lot of psychology literature, a lot of education and leadership literature is published in book format rather than journal articles. It is helpful for that. So I wouldn't use it exclusively, but as part of your set of tools and for just doing a quick look and seeing what's out there, very handy. There was a comment about shared leadership theory here. So I am going to go ahead and do a search here for shared leadership theory. I'm putting it in quotation marks because I'm trying to narrow down to that exact string of words. And so with no date restrictions, you see, I have 606 results up here. And I say, well, I'd like this to be recent research. We're defining recent research as last 5 years. So since 2016, we'll do that. And I've still got 260. Great. Now, if you see these links on the side, those are all links out to get to the articles. Sometimes it's a link, to get to the thing, whatever it is, a book chapter, article, or whatever. Not everything will have it. This one here, we'd have to go in through that database to get there. That's actually one of my former students. This is a link straight to the dissertation here. And this is, the author has posted their article on academia.edu for download. This takes you to the publisher website. This person has published it on their university page, so that's fine. You're looking at this, we can see, oh, gosh, this has been cited by 83 different articles, 83 different things that Google Scholar knows about have cited this. This looks like it's an important piece of literature on shared leadership. So I'm going to go ahead and look at this. and see where it's leading us. That wasn't terribly helpful. All right, we're going to take this link directly to the article here. Here's the whole article. It's being excerpted and pasted here. We even have the citation information here. And we see that this particular forum on this website is an advanced online publication. So really, we should go ahead and look at the final one and see were there any changes made. And sometimes when you run into a redirect like this, it'll ask you, will you approve that change? Let's not deal with that. Let's stick with this for now. Because I could log into ACU and grab this later. So we find that there's the abstract here. And I'd say always start with the abstract, because the abstract will help tell you, do you want to read more? See, okay, the present study was designed to produce novel theoretical insight regarding how leader humility and team member characteristics foster the conditions that promote shared leadership, and when shared leadership relates to team effectiveness. All right, I'm interested so far. Drawing on social information processing theory and adaptive leadership theory. Okay, so if you're looking at the assignment requirements, and some of the annotated bibliographies do state the conceptual framework or theoretical framework. This is telling you what this is. They're using two theories here for their theoretical framework here. So if you've already decided, I'm probably going to do this, go ahead and jot this down. We propose that leadership humility facilitates shared leadership by promoting leadership claiming and leadership granting interactions among team members. We also applied dominance complementary theory. Okay, so there's a third one there, to propose that team proactive personality strengthens the impact of leader humility on shared leadership. Finally, we predict that shared leadership will be most strongly related to team performance when team members have high levels of task-related competence. Using a sample composed of 62 Taiwanese professional work teams, we find support for a proposed hypothesized model. And then the last sentence is saying, we talked about these things. So if you're looking at that list of requirements, this is already given a lot of the pieces that you need, which theories they were using, some stuff about the study that they did, not all of it, that they were working on putting together a model. This was geographically restricted to work teams in Taiwan, but they got 62, and 62 teams is a pretty good number. You won't find a lot of higher ones in the literature there. 62 teams is a lot of work, and usually you need to have a lot of assistants to help interview all those people. We have the author's affiliations here. You can see that they're geographically distributed. We've got one in South Australia, one at BYU in Utah, one at SUNY Buffalo. Okay. And, if you read the whole article and then you decide you want to go grab everything, you can do a couple of searches that will speed things up. Because if you know you're looking for a particular thing, like I want to find their conceptual or theoretical framework, you can do a word search to help with that. So this, you can see I can highlight the text. So this was uploaded as an electronic PDF of the probably InDesign document they have. So it's word searchable, as opposed to, they just scanned in a picture of it. So that means that I can go ahead and just press Command F on my Mac, Control F if I was in a PC, and type in framework and see where did they use that word. And so, okay, social information processing theory. All right, we got that down here. And then they have the specific description of their theoretical framework, which they put together in a model using this. So this is not the framework that they use for the study. This is the framework that they're proposing for further work. So this would be one of the findings or products of the study. And they talk about shared leadership in teams. Most of this you don't need to go over except to say, did it seem a little short, or was it adequate for what they're doing? But what you're probably thinking when you're trying to understand the journal article, let's focus on what are they doing. And one of the questions that you have to answer in almost all of the annotated bibliography assignments I've seen is what kind of design did they use? Starting with the method, was it qualitative, quantitative, or mixed methods? If you're not familiar with those, qualitative is basically things that can't easily be counted. How did you feel about this? As what are some words that come to mind? Things that are more potentially open-ended. Quantitative, can we numerize it and say things like, well, 68% of people said this, or 52% of the teams didn't like that, or what was the average size kind of thing. Mixed methods is when you have both. Try and avoid doing a mixed methods study if you can for your doctorate. Mixed methods takes a lot of work, and it's generally recommended when you are a veteran researcher and you have access to special things that make it worth that extra work. So here we can look at this and say, okay, they say right off the bat, very first sentence in this section, they used a survey-based design. Okay, so that's one of the things you would want to be reporting. And they mention why they chose this sample. And keep in mind, none of those researchers listed as the authors are in Taiwan, and none of the names look particularly Chinese. So see, they had this rationale. They chose the sample because of this particular thing about it. Now, they explain why that was appropriate. In your section about limitations, you can potentially list this as saying, well, okay, they found that in this area, but we don't know how generalizable it is because they only looked at that area. That's one of those things you could put in there. How did they measure stuff? Well, when they were surveying people, they break it down. And so, they used a 9-item scale using Likert scale responses. That's this 5-point thing here, which they explain down here. So if you go to each section of the assignment description and then you go back to this document looking for those specific things, it's easier to spot them when you're looking for just that thing. Like, okay, so how did they assess things? All right, so they had that study design, and okay, they were using a 9-item Likert scale. There was a comment in the chat that not all articles include this. That is true, because how much they include is usually dependent on the journal that they're publishing in. Some journals will say, explain all this, and others will say, we are a more concise publication. You don't need to pull back the curtain for all of that. Now, it's certainly a legitimate criticism that you can make, saying, and while they did say these were their conclusions, a weakness is they didn't tell us exactly how they got that. And again, it all depends on what the journal's audience is, and thus what the journal requires. And that's not necessarily saying that the authors have done something bad or that the journals are dumbing things down. There's a whole set of journals that basically create kind of executive summary versions of research. And you might have your big study that has all the details, and then you're asked to write, the 3 or 4 page version of that goes into a slightly more mass market thing. And one of the reasons people do that is that then when, say, some news station looks at that, they're more likely to understand it than if you gave them here's absolutely everything. Okay, a couple more things here. They do detail all these things that they were tracking in a nice, easily sorted and labeled manner. That is not the kind of level you're expected to put into your annotated bibliography thing. Those would be what we call distracting details. It's not that they're not true, but they distract from getting to the point of, okay, was this helpful or not? Is this a strength? And you could say a strength is it is very clearly documented and they include all this detail. Great, that could be one of your strengths, things that you list. And then, of course, you do want to report on the findings and the results, which are not necessarily the same thing. The results are, okay, here's what we got, which includes, here's what we got from any sort of statistical analysis we did. And the findings are, here's what we learned from that. Like, because of this set of results, we concluded that these people do not like that, or these people do like the other thing. In this case, they included full descriptive statistics with all these results from the mathematical analyses. Many articles will just give you, a set number of these, and anything that wasn't significant, they'll just say, that wasn't, and leave it at that. Yeah, it's a question of how much space they give you and how much they want. You'll see that there's this whole discussion section at the end, and they talk about how they think their research will add to the literature. So you'll see that this section is not small. They do have their own limitation section. Not all journals will require this, but they mention some limitations, and you get to decide whether you think that these are complete or not. You might say, but they neglected to mention this other thing. Or you might say that they neglected to mention the potential bias of they were testing this thing that they were just given by this company, so they may not be unbiased. You can mention if you think something was left out that's important. And of course, the conclusion here. Here's a suggestion about how to digest a lot of literature fast. Because one of the things that you are doing when you are writing these assignments, your first task is to find, is this something that you might want to write on, and thus give the very detailed read. And I would say start with the abstract, and then go ahead and read the conclusion. Maybe glance at the findings, but start with the abstract and the conclusion. And that will probably tell you if you are interested enough to spend more time on this, because you say, well, they said we didn't find any meaningful results. You might say, well, I'm going to go find some article that did. I'm not going to waste my time or my reader's time on this. And that's fine. All right, we're going to back up and look at, we are almost out of time. So I'm going to bring up another one, but I'm going to say, if you have any questions or anything you'd like me to talk about or explain more, now's a great time to ask those questions. So here, there's a Sport for Development Organization article. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and look at this. And we see we've got our authors here. We have a total of 5 authors. So rather than list out their names, unless your instructions specifically say name the authors, I'd say, okay, the 5 authors came from this university, that university, and the other university. And that's how you can say that very concisely. The abstract helpfully tells us this is a qualitative case study. It looks like they were looking at a few other things. And I'm just going to answer some questions in the chat window. Yes, anyone who either RSVP'd or emailed, anyone who RSVP'd or typed their email address in the chat window will get a copy of the recording and a copy of the slide deck sent to them. If you didn't do either of those, just type your email address in the chat window and I will add you to the list when that goes out. I'm going to be posting the video later tonight, so probably around 8:30 it will be going up. And let's see, briefly here, we see their lit review. Okay, they describe their conceptual framework in this section, nicely labeled. They even have a graphic showing how it works. If you're in the DNP program, you have to do an assignment like this. So, And then if we go ahead and look down at their conclusions, see, this is not a small one. And I'd say, okay, read this with the abstract. And they talk about how the results relate to what came before. On that note, I think we have to stop because we're out of time. Thank you everyone for attending. I'm going to go ahead and answer a couple last questions, and then I will close this up. So Professor has asked for further explanation other than just a qualitative or quantitative method of research. So qualitative, quantitative mixed methods, those are methodologies. Those are more general, okay, is this something that is easily countable or something that's not countable, or both? Quantitative is the countable, qualitative is the not easily countable, mixed methods is the both. Now, within that, you have, okay, what's the designer or approach that you're using? And so you want to look for statements like this: a single qualitative case study approach. So that's saying we looked at one thing, we're treating it as this specific thing, a case, hence the term case study. We're only looking at one, which is why it's single case study as opposed to multiple. Multiple would be like, we went and looked at things at 3 different schools. Single would be, we went and looked at stuff at 1 school. So that's the kind of thing that you are looking for. In the previous article we looked at, that was a survey. They used a survey. They used a qualitative survey to collect information. And so where will you find that information? Generally, if you head right to the methods section, might be labeled research methods, might be labeled research design. You'll usually find that in the first paragraph, if not the first sentence like you see here. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you, everyone.